Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY sailboat refit video here about good old Athena. Last week I got 2 of 3 coats of Perfection Pro applied to the hull, and the result, if I do say so myself, looks pretty dang spiffy. Now this week it's gonna rain almost every single day, so I'm gonna get a little bit of a break from sanding and painting. I figured I'd use that break to install the rudder, the flappy bit that's gonna go here and hopefully give us some kind of a say in where the boat takes us. Speaking of, by the time I publish this video, it'll only be 249 days till I've got my last day of work at my day job, and then my fiance Ava and I will be able to start cruising full time. Last year I found some rust oozing out the bottom of the old rudder. I chose the nuclear option and opened up the rudder. Turns out it wasn't as bad as I had feared, but the rudder is something we want to make absolutely sure does not fail. I made a mold out of the old rudder before destroying it, and I then used that mold to make 2 spiffy new rudder shells using vacuum infusion. The rudder stock was reinforced and sent off for passivation. The rudder was assembled and then filled with an expanding epoxy foam. And this is what the rudder looks like now. This is rock solid and easily ready for another 30 years worth of sailing. I also had a new tiller arm made. This crusty, rusty mess here is the old one, and of course the spiffy, shiny one here is the new one. I got this back from the machine shop last week. They put a new keyway in it and made 2 new keys for me. The tiller arm attaches to the rudder stock, and then this gets pushed and pulled through a rack and pinion setup when you turn the wheel. The bottom of the rudder is attached to the skeg with this little doohickey. There's a bushing on the bottom of the rudder that goes in here, and then the skeg is in here, and these are supposed to get clamped onto the skeg. That sounds fairly easily, but this is the old one, this is the new one, and I think there's going to be quite a lot of brute force involved to make this be the exact same shape as this. They look pretty much identical, but there is a slight difference, and I think that is going to be a very challenging and exciting experience. But the only thing that's keeping me from installing the rudder right now is this little guy over here. Or to be more precise, the seal that sits inside of him. As you can see, this doesn't really seal all that well. The job of this is to seal around the rudder stock. I've ordered a new one and it should get here tomorrow. The rudder stock has a little threaded hole here in the end where the emergency tiller would normally attach. And I think that's going to come in very useful a little bit later on, because I can use an eye bolt to secure the rudder while I get everything lined up. Last week really took its toll on me. There was a lot, as in a lot of sanding, and also a lot of crawling around on the scaffolding. This week I'm going to take things a little bit slower. Like for instance today, while I'm waiting for that seal to show up, I'm going to sort some stainless bolts. I keep on ordering nuts and bolts in sizes that I've already got, and that's because this is one of my nuts and bolts storage boxes. And it's just not super convenient. So I picked up 3 of these bad boys. This is going to be an organizational game changer, or at least it's going to make it easier for me to find the nuts and bolts I need. Aha! Feast your eyes on this delightful looking letter. This should be the seal I've been waiting for. Sure, this could look like a 30-year younger version of this. I think with just a little bit of persuasion, this is gonna fit. And it also looks like the seal is a good fit on the rudder stock, so let's go ahead and see if we can get the rudder shoved up in the boat. I'm gonna need about 2 meters and 5 centimeters worth of clearance. And right now I've only got about 1.85 meters, so I'm gonna have to dig a little bit deeper. I think the hole is large enough now, so let's go ahead and see if I can shove the rudder into the hole before the rain closes the hole back up. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but the rudder is freakishly heavy. I'm going to attempt to sling that black cable around my shoulder so that I can lift while at the same time guiding the rudder stock. There's a bushing in here, and the combination of the rudder being super heavy and this being a pretty tight fit, this is not super easy. Maybe it'll help if I grease the rudder stock. That certainly can't hurt, and it should make things slide just a little bit easier. Sure, I could have asked somebody to help me, but there is a certain amount of satisfaction in doing something like that on your own. Something where you have to sort of improvise a little bit, and then when you pull it off, it's very rewarding. Next up, I can fill up the hole. So far, so good. If I can just get this inched up a little bit higher, then the top of the rudder stock is going to be accessible inside of the boat. The top of the rudder stock is now exposed here inside of the boat, so I should now be able to use my little eye bolt here, screw that in place, and then just lift the rudder instead of trying to push it. Before I start lifting the rudder, I'm going to apply butyl tape to this top bushing here so I don't have to fiddle with that when it's almost in place. It's not pretty, but this will do the trick, especially considering that this threaded thing here is in no way sealed. Once I've pulled the rudder up, there is going to be no easy way for me to lower it again, so let's hope I get this right. Yep, we're getting closer and closer. I need just about this much more. Using the old rudder attachment doohickey here, it looks like maybe just one click more and we'll be there. Well, that should be it. I mulled over the rudder attachment situation with Mr. Cement Boat Guy, and he suggested that it might be easier to make a slightly larger bushing than the old one, rather than trying to brute force this into shape. We filled a couple of gloves with polyester filler and used the old bushing with the new attachment doohickey to figure out the size of the new bushing. After the polyester filler filled gloves had cured, we measured the size of the new bushing, and it turned out to be 77 millimeters. After a little bit of fiddling about with Mr. Lathe, it is in with the new and out with the old. Of course, the new, slightly larger bushing is gonna leave a little bit of a gap here in the back, but that shouldn't really matter. I can make some kind of spacer and put in here, and that should be perfectly fine. Before heading home yesterday, I filled 4 of these holes here with thickened epoxy. I left 2 unfilled so I can clamp everything in place, make sure everything is lined up correctly before I drill the new holes. It looks like we've got a small issue here because when the rudder turns, it rubs against the skeg, and I'm not sure I've got enough wiggle room to adjust the rudder, but let's find out. Here inside of the boat, I have just temporarily put in place the tiller arm way back here and the rudder stop. And if I move the tiller arm, yep, the rudder does bind before the tiller arm hits the rudder stop. Maybe I can fix this by just pulling the rudder a little bit further aft. We're very, very close, but yeah, if that doesn't work, then I'm gonna have to slightly modify the skeg. I've shifted the rudder a tiny bit further aft. It still moves nice and freely, and I can now get maximum rudder angle right there. And I still have about 1.5 millimeters worth of clearance down here. Now that I'm happy with the alignment of the rudder, I can go ahead and drill the new holes. The purpose of the threaded rod here is just to act as a guide so I get the direction kinda right. I've still got 2 oversized holes in here that I want to fill, but before I take everything apart, I want to figure out where to place this. This is just a tiny little sink anode to help protect the stainless. The old one did not have one of these, and I think it's a welcomed addition. The very last thing I'm gonna do before pulling all of this apart again is just to measure for the 2 spacers I'm gonna put in here. I think somewhere right around 17 millimeters should do. After a little bit of fiddling about, I've now got two very, very precise little spacers. Let's take everything apart for hopefully the last time. I need to weld in place a little bit of threaded rod for that sinker node, and also I need to enlarge these holes just a tiny bit to fit the 10mm threading inside of these spacers. Just a quick dab of this super toxic, delicious red stuff on the welds, and that will be the modifications of the rudder attachment doohickey done. Let's go ahead and fill those two oversized holes in the skeg. I think 2 pumps should be plenty. To the epoxy, I am going to add a little bit of chopped up fiberglass just to give it a little bit of strength, and a little bit of 406 to thicken it. I am kind of dodging little burps of rain here, which certainly is not ideal. But if I can just get this area covered with some plastic, everything should be okay. I'm going to cover the holes with a little bit of masking tape just in case that plastic starts flapping around. I don't want it to smear the thickened epoxy everywhere. And of course the same goes here on the other side. That should be fairly well protected, and if this doesn't get messed up, then tomorrow we should be able to do the final installation of the rudder. You guys saw the super shiny rudder stop a little earlier on. This is the old one. Super crusty and rusty. This is the old aftmost rudder stop. There's also an old forward rudder stop that's also gonna get replaced with a much shinier version. Shiny. Tomorrow it would be awesome if I could not only finish installing the rudder but also get it hooked up to the steering pedestal, and really the only thing keeping me from doing that is the forward rudder stop. I marked the location of the old one, which was right here, and the new one is identical, so if I just drill some holes here and get this mounted, that should be good enough. Would it have been easier to do this before installing the engine and the diesel tank? Yes. Did I do that? Nope. So now I get to pay the price. The rudder stop does need to be pretty strong, so just like the old one, I am going to through bolt it through the cockpit sole. As you guys can see, there is absolutely none of the core exposed here. That's because I've already drilled oversized holes and filled those with thickened epoxy. So there's no way any kind of leak here is going to damage the core. So just a little bit of butyl tape, and hopefully I'll be able to get these installed before it starts raining again. Yep, nope, now it's raining. Oh, I don't like this weather. Huh? As you might just barely be able to see there, the rudder stop is now in place. And this is what it looks like up in the cockpit. That is perfectly acceptable to me. Who has 2 thumbs and is ready to have a fully functional rudder again? This guy. It's Sunday morning and the thickened epoxy from yesterday seems to have cured nicely. So let's go ahead and get the doohickey clamp back in place so I can drill the last 2 holes. And of course, now it is raining again. It seems like the weather only has 2 settings here in Denmark during the summer, and that's either rain or heat wave. This Sikaflex cures by exposure to moisture, and I think we can all agree that there is plenty of that going around today. All I need to do now to be able to finish installing the rudder here is just to put the little spacers here in the back in place. Everything is tightened down now. The finishing touch, of course, is the little sink anode. That certainly would have been a lot more fun if it hadn't been raining, but Athena looks awesome with her rudder back on. If I wanted to get Athena back in the water as soon as I possibly could, all that I would need now is one through hull that's on its way here and a new prop. I'm still trying to figure out which one to go with, but yeah. She is very close to being ready to go back in the water. Of course, there are many more items on my to-do list here to get Athena back in the water. Like, for instance, applying that 3rd and final coat of paint as soon as it'll stop frigid raining. And also maybe some cleats would be nice. But yeah, I think October is realistic for getting Athena back in the water. Before I move this install rudder task into the done column, I would really like to actually get the rudder connected to the wheel. For now, I'm just going to use a couple of stainless bolts in the tiller arm. Before we do any kind of serious sailing, I'm going to replace these with something a lot stronger. But for now, these are fine. I'm probably going to have to pull the tiller arm out of the boat when I go to install the electronic autopilot, but that's not going to happen until maybe the spring. So yeah, for now, I'm just going to install it and use a little bit of Tough Gel to make life a little bit easier once I go to take everything back apart. While I was messing about here inside of the cockpit locker, the sun came out, so maybe I should just have waited a few hours, and installing the rudder would have been a much more pleasant experience. But I've got the tiller arm fully installed here, and well, as you can see, I still need this bolt right here, but I don't have one of those, so I'll have to order that. But other than that, this should all be fully functional. Oh yeah, and the attachment point over here, that is for the autopilot, but like I said, we're going to come back to that maybe in the spring. Inspired by the lack of rain, I decided to attach the wheel, and standing there behind a fully functional steering pedestal, it is hard not to imagine all of the awesome adventures Ava and I are going to have aboard Athena. It feels nothing short of amazing to be able to move this install rudder task into the done column. In terms of next week, I think I'm going to order the plywood I need to build the washer and dryer area in the forward cabin, and also that little area for the freezer, because the weather is going to be, well, yet again, mostly rain. The washer and the dryer are going to go here behind this little separation here, and then the freezer is going to be in here. Now next week, I'm not actually going to bring the washer and the dryer aboard Athena. Both the washer and the dryer are bulky, heavy items, and they're going to be a lot easier to get aboard Athena with Athena back in the water. It's just going to be a matter of motoring over to the little mast crane in the marina and lowering them in through the forward hatch. Whereas now I would have to hire some kind of crane to come here and lift them up aboard the boat. And that is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to get Athena back in the water, because it's going to be a lot easier to bring heavy things aboard. Also, the final placement of the battery bank, the isolation transformer, and the inverter chargers is a little bit dependent on how Athena sits once she goes back in the water. So before I finish too much of the aft cabin, the technical compartment, it would be nice to just get her back in the water to see how she sits. Of course, all of that is still a few months off, and there's plenty of other stuff to do before I get to that. But for now, I am just really, really glad I got the rudder back on and that it's fully functional. And that is going to be the end of this week's video. I hope to see all of you guys back here aboard Athena next week for yet more DIY fun. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!